Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 394, Krishna and Orpheus. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books blogs. I'm not sure which category to put it in. It's kind of under the scriptures heading, but it's also academic and technically a little folkloric, so I'll have to figure that out for my blog post later. 108 pages, so this is an intermediate read. Very well written. Very, very interesting. Also re-illustrated by Raven Feather Illustrations, so you have to illustrate basically every work now unless you're doing heavy footnoting and stuff like that. You can't just reformat and do grammatical checking and do de-archaicization of words and do a new cover and a unique forward. Apparently that's not enough anymore. It doesn't matter. You have to also do other things. Anyway, getting through that, because it's not a big problem. This is an excellent work. It's basically about the brief, truncated sort of story about the life and a few basic themes of Krishna and Orpheus. You'll notice that these stories have a lot in common, despite the fact that there wasn't a lot of transference between the Indus Valley culture and the ancient East Mediterranean region, the Aegean Sea, etc. There was some, certainly by the time of Rome, you get more of this. But some of the writings predate that period of time. In some cases, and this book is explicitly about these two, but it does mention in passing a number of other particular solar figures, and that's really the crux of this work, that it's about the solar defeating the lunar cults of old. It's about the rise of masculine religion. This ties into the phallicism content with the masculine cross, serpent worship and things like this, the cultus arborum, tree worship actually, pillars and minarets and church spires and all of these other penis things, which is sometimes a hyperbolic stretch. Oftentimes it doesn't appear to be. The mushroom and the cross sort of thing ties in with that as well. Thor's hammer as well. And Odin, of course, was crucified on the tree in order to learn the runes, and this theme repeats itself over and over. So you've got the birth, you've got various acts, usually in glorious combat against what could be construed as lunar or quasi-feminine forces, and then ultimately, effectively a sacrifice or a death of some quasi-sacrificial spiritual significance. Krishna and Orpheus are two good examples, but it's not limited to that. You've got basically every diaspora religion that comes from that region of the world, from Central Asia and the Indus region, all the way across to the middle of the Mediterranean. They all share certain facets that appear to be interlinked. Again, this was a theme back then. We're talking latter half of the 19th, early few decades of the 20th century. This and other concepts associated with it was fascinating to people. Now, a lot of them had a different theory that we might have today, outside of the ancient aliens or evangelical conceptualization. They thought, well, this points to the antediluvian period, the Tower of Babel and things like this. And in only the last 6,000 years, humans have branched out from that central sort of core Garden of Eden source, and so naturally all these different groups have these similarities. These days, of course, we wouldn't ascribe it to that one antediluvian pre-flood central point necessarily. We would say it's the result of movement and trade of ideas and conquest. There are a few problems with this more accepted latter-day theory, though, in that even uncontacted or supposedly uncontacted or very infrequently contacted groups, whether conquered eventually or not, don't appear to have a substantial differentiation. They still have the same basic concept. One of the major premises that you'll see, as well as seasonal, with the idea, for example, of the story of Persephone getting ravished by Hades, taken down to hell, basically. It's clearly a seasonal story. You've got the winter and summer. The number of seasons sometimes matters and their nature. In some tales, it's the dry and wet season. The wet season, you're growing things, is grain and plenty. The dry season, it's kind of miserable. There's not a lot to do. In other climates, you get cold and warm. The limiting factors of mankind and the resuscitation of the earth whether through the rains coming or the sun returning or whatever happens, is important within these spiritual systems. You can interpret that how you will. There are still competing theories about why these overlaps exist, some of which are more secularly accepted, some of which are more spiritually accepted. I don't know that any of them actually approach the truth. I'm thinking that there might be some shenanigans going on in the human timeline. Maybe it is spooky woo. Maybe it literally has to do with aliens. And Krishna and Orpheus actually literally glowed in the dark and had magical powers because they just walked off the UFO. I'm not going to get into that, and that's certainly not the context of this story. But two excellent works. It's really two shorter works compressed together for comparison purposes, and does make that good case for the rise of the solar religion, destruction of the old lunar cults, and the concept of the solar deity, effectively the savior. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon, second and third links to my books blogs. That's about all. Peace out.